Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the back porch. You've never seen this angle of it before. We're in the midst of a major construction project because our back deck was falling to pieces. It was literally like paper mache. You could put your fingers through some of the posts because it had rotted all the way through. And so we have a construction crew here rebuilding it, literally every nut, bolt, and plank from the ground up. And one of the things we discovered when we went to get a permit from the city of Santa Cruz was they said, well, you've got to have way better foundations or this thing's going to fall apart again. And so they have put in this massive foundation. I mean, look at the size of this thing. And on all of the posts, there's the foundations are so big, it's like we're building some kind of a parking garage now. But the thing is, we live on a riparian corridor next to a creek, and they said the soil's very sandy. And so unless you dig down deep and put in these foundations, your house is in danger of falling. And here in the Santa Cruz area, we don't have to look very far to see evidence of what happens to homes without a foundation. Many of the very early cabins, especially up in the mountains, were built with literally no foundation at all. And many of them have slid right down the side of the mountains. Well, all that, of course, reminds me of a great parable that Jesus told. In the book of Matthew, he tells this parable about two builders, a wise one and a foolish one. And the foolish man builds his house on sand, and when a storm comes, the house falls with a great crash. But the wise one builds his house on rock with a good foundation, and when the storm comes and the winds blow and the flood rises, his house stands. And then Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 24, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Now, did you hear that? He says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. What words? What has he just finished saying that he wants us to put into practice as a good foundation? Well, that parable comes right at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus has been saying things like, love your enemies and don't judge anybody and give and it will be given to you and don't worry and don't be a religious show-off. Well, often I look within myself and I'm not practicing those words that he said. Jesus says, well, then you're building your life on sand. And when the storms come, you're gonna crash. You know, one thing I learned from watching these guys work on our foundation is a lot of stuff has to be removed to get a good foundation in. They had to dredge out a lot of junk out of this hole before they poured in the foundation. And you might have to dredge out some junk, some anger, some bitterness, some unforgiveness, some worrying, some coveting, as you dig down deep for that foundation to be poured. But let's do it because floods and storms are going to come. Floods of grief, floods of tough times, floods of temptation. And maybe this past year has revealed to you just how shaky your foundations are. One thing's for sure, no matter who you are, no matter how mature you are in Christ, you know more spiritual truth than you're actually living out right now. But don't be discouraged. You can still choose from this day on to build like the wise man, to build with a good foundation, to listen to what Jesus says here in the Bible and actually do what he says. Actually be like Jesus. Just start where you are today. Practice what you already know. And then as you learn more, put that into practice too. Listen, we've all been hearers of the word long enough. Let's put the words of Jesus into practice in our lives. And this is so important. I'm going to be back here tomorrow and talk more about this. God bless you. Let's build a good foundation together.